All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, we've just had, the quarterfinals of the Challenge Cup played. A few surprising results there. Did you enjoy it?
Very much so, yes. Yes, probably more than Catalans fans or St Helens fans, I would think. Obviously, two surprising results, really. Huddersfield winning easily in Perpignan, and we've not even seen the game, have we? It wasn't broadcast, that game, so that's a real disappointment, and that disappointment was referred to by Huddersfield coach Ian Watson, who said, it was a shame that the fans who weren't able to go to France couldn't see the game, and that's true, of course. And then what a result for Warrington on Sunday, 31-8 at St Helens. I thought it would be a close game, but nobody expected a margin of 23 points, did they? Anybody who said that they would have predicted that, I think, is probably living in a dream world. I thought Saints would, after losing at Catalans the previous week, I thought Saints would come back and win that game. Yep. But actually, Warrington were very convincing winners. And a lot of their players had really great games. George Williams, though, was the mastermind, wasn't he? And had an absolutely superb game. It's funny, Jake, because I went to the pre-season launch at Warrington before the season started, when the players, you were able to access several of their players and talk to Sam Burgess and so on. And I think I said it at the time, I just got the feeling then that because it's interesting, when you go to a pre-season event at any club, everybody says it's going to be a great year. Nobody ever says it's going to be a bad year, do they? Let's face it. So they all say it's going to be, we're going to do well this year. And sometimes you've got to interpret that, and you've got to read between the lines a little bit and decide how much spirit there really is in the camp. But I did get the feeling at Warrington that it was genuine, and I think I said it at the time. And of course, they then started with some good results. They lost very narrowly at Catalans in their first game, and they've had a lot of good wins since then. They've had a great win at Hull KR, for example. But I also said, we've got to wait to see when they play the really big teams, the Wigan, St Helens and Catalans, to see whether they really are a contender this year. And they've now shown that they are. I mean, it wasn't just that they beat St Helens, they actually beat them quite convincingly. And actually, they had quite a few players missing as well. It wasn't as though they were, at top strength. But, the way they piloted their way through that game, I thought they moved the ball around really well. They put St Helens under constant pressure. George Williams, as I say, was fantastic. And Matty Ashton, what a brilliant try.
That put down, He
got our try of the week, and it was a competition for that between Joe Burgess's try for Hull KR the previous day, and Matty Ashton's incredible touchdown in the corner. But for sheer athleticism and the sheer brilliance of being in it was a bit like, not entirely like, but a bit like the try we saw scored for Melbourne Storm earlier this year, wasn't it? And it was just great, and it gave Warrington so much confidence, I thought, that they were always going to go on and win the game from that point. So, great performance by them, and congratulations to Sam Burgess and to all the team, and, to the Warrington fans. They must be very optimistic now about reaching Wembley, although they play Huddersfield in the semi-final. And suddenly that looks a great game, doesn't it? That looks a fabulous game. We don't know yet where it's going to be played, but my goodness, that looks exciting.
And after watching a lot of the highlights of the Huddersfield match, it's going to be a great attacking matchup. They both seem to be moving the ball very swiftly.
Well, Jake Connor seems to be coming to prominence again, doesn't he, now, for Huddersfield. He had a very good game for them at Catalans, and Catalans found it difficult to handle him, and that's just tremendous for the Giants fans, and I hope they all turn out in big numbers, in the next few weeks for their team, because they really deserve to have the whole of Huddersfield turning out to watch them, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. And there's an article in League Express this week, I believe, Sam Burgess talking about how well Ben Curry's played through the middle. As a bit of a ball playing loose forward. We've touched on it on the podcast in previous episodes, but yeah, he's just found a way to tie both sides of their attack together in the middle there, and he's playing outstanding football.
He is, but he actually wasn't playing, was he, on Sunday? I mean, he wasn't actually in the side.
Yeah,
He was in the 21-man squad, but wasn't selected for the game itself. I think he might have had maybe had a strain of some sort. Who knows? But that's what I was saying a bit earlier, that they didn't have their full strength side out. They had quite a few players missing. I mean, Stephen Ratchford didn't play. Obviously, Curry, Josh Drinkwater. Well, Josh Drinkwater's not getting in at the moment because of this young kid, Leon Hayes, playing so well. And it doesn't look as though, Leon Hayes is going to stop playing well, does it?
No.
And he's a great foil to George Williams at halfback. So, the Warrington team just looks really great at the moment.
It's a great selection headache for Sam Burgess to have.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, well, we will come back to Warrington in the news a little bit later, but we'll move on to, I guess, the Hull KR matchup. Hull KR 26 defeated Lee 14. What did you make of the Rovers' performance in this one, and a bit of improvement from Lee as well?
Oh, I thought there was a lot of improvement from Lee, actually. And Lee were winning at half-time, weren't they? It was, what was the half-time score? It was 8-4 to Lee. So, no, I thought Lee in the first half. The really key thing for Lee, I thought, was Tom Amone coming back. He's a really great forward, and they've missed him very badly. And he just gave them so much power in the middle of the field that Hull KR, in the first half in particular, when he was on the field, they struggled to handle him, I thought. And it just looked as though, they were creating space, and they did extraordinarily well. But having said that, Hull KR rallied in the second half. Mikey Lewis and Tyrone May, I think, are a really strongly developing halfback partnership for them, and they were able to, come back into the game and win it fairly convincingly in the end. But it was a real great game though, and I think Lee are going to improve a lot when they get all their players back. They've still got loads of players out. Obviously John Asiata, excuse me, the captain. And Robbie Mulhern is now out of action for several weeks, which is, he's the front row partner for Tom Amone. It's a real blow for them.
Very disappointing.
There's still time for them to move up the table and get into the top six, but they do need to start winning games fairly soon. And it doesn't help them, I suppose, that this weekend they're at Warrington.
Doesn't get any easier, does it?
No. Sorry, I'm just coughing a bit, but. No, it's they're having a difficult time, but I think they've got a lot of improvement in them when they get their players back.
No, absolutely. We'll move on to the next game. Huddersfield 34 defeated Kearnan 6. What did you make of this one? Obviously, a bit of a shock defeat there for Kearnan.
Well, as I said earlier, the real thing for Huddersfield is that Jake Connor's playing really well, but also, Adam Swift. I've said before several times that I think Adam Swift is very near to an international class player, a winger, and he was great again for them. And I just think that Swift scored one try and Connor scored another, and tries were scored by Milner, Ikahihifo and Masters and Nagama, 6 tries, which is almost unthinkable to do at Catalans by a visiting side. So, you've got to say, although I've not seen the game, you've got to say that the Giants are really coming to the fore. And there will be a very difficult challenge for Warrington in the semi-final, and for anybody else in Super League as well. And it's great to see because, they've promised a lot for quite a long time, the Giants, but never quite delivered. I know they got to Wembley, well, not to Wembley, to Tottenham in 2022, which was a great achievement, but just didn't quite manage to beat Wigan. Very nearly did. But they need to come again, and Ian Watson was saying they've had 8 new players, I think, this year in their squad, so they've taken some time to gel. But they certainly do seem to be doing that now.
We'll move on to the other matchup of the weekend. Wigan 60 defeated Cass 6.
Well, what can you say about this? Just one-sided from the start, I'm afraid. Wigan scored about 4 tries in the first 20 minutes and the game was over. And that's such a shame, particularly when Castleford had played quite well to beat Salford the previous weekend. And obviously Wigan are clearly the best team in the league at the moment, without the slightest doubt, I think. And although they lost at St Helens, of course, in that very tight Good Friday game. But, Wigan are the team to beat, I think, in every competition this year so far. And they play Hull KR now in the semi-final, and it gives them the chance to get revenge for last year's semi-final defeat by the Robins. But again, that's going to be a real great game to watch, and hopefully with a big crowd of fans from both sides cheering their teams on. And you can't write off Hull KR in that game, not by the slightest margin, and I'm really looking forward to it.
It's a hard one to pick, because you think about Wigan going down to Saints, and then Saints losing to the Dragons, and then the Dragons then losing to Huddersfield. It doesn't make sense, some of these scorelines.
No, but that's
seeing,
great.
It's
great great when you get some unexpected results, isn't it? Not every game goes to goes as expected, and that's great. You need that in any competition. Once games become predictable, the only really predictable result in the 4 Cup quarterfinals was Wigan's win at Castleford, wasn't it? And only too predictable, unfortunately. But so when games are predictable, that's when they become less attractive. With great respect to Castleford and Wigan, but the other 3 games I thought all had lots to offer, and were really great it was great to see some great play, great tries, and unexpected outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we'll move on, because we've already touched on the Warrington Saints game, but I just wanted to ask you this question regarding Sam Burgess. Is it too early to call his appointment a success?
No, I don't think so. As I say, when he was appointed, obviously a few people had doubts. My doubts were quelled somewhat, as I've said already, when I went to see them pre-season. But I still wasn't 100% sure. But when his team can beat St Helens and beat them so convincingly, then the doubts start to disappear. And, you never know. There's always a chance that, that Lee will spring a shock against them this weekend. But I think it's looking good for Warrington, and they won the Challenge Cup in 2019 when they beat St Helens at Wembley. The team has totally changed since those days, or virtually totally changed, but they've got a great chance of winning it again, and of course what they'd love to do as well is to win the grand final at Old Trafford. They've been there several times, but never managed to win it. And they would just give anything. They've not been the champions since 1955, I think, the last time they won it was. So that's an awful long time to wait, isn't it? Nearly 70 years. So I think they're really going well. The interesting thing, for them is Sam's success will obviously be noticed in Australia, won't it? And it'll be noticed by South Sydney, I'm fairly sure. But as I've said before, I think Sam, it doesn't look to me as though they're going to, move on Jason Dimitri in the near future from South Sydney. But I think South Sydney would probably be the worst club Sam could go to in Australia. There's just too much baggage there, really, at that club for him. And I think he'd be better going to another club altogether. But anyway, if and when he does go, I hope he if he's watching this podcast, Sam, I hope you stay for an awful long time with Warrington, and I'm sure the Warrington fans probably feel just the same way. So, good luck to him and good luck to them for the rest of the season.
No, he's a huge asset to our competition over here, and
absolutely.
I'm sure all Warrington fans have got their fingers crossed after the success they experienced last season. I'm sure that's in the back of their minds saying, let's just keep going,
absolutely.
keep winning. But yeah, really great to see them playing good football. And now, just another thing on Huddersfield, going into last weekend, the weekend just gone by, I didn't know what to expect from them because they were coming off of 3 games two against Hull FC and then one was against London. So we didn't know all those games are big blowouts, but it wasn't until they come up against some real competition we'd see, whether that would carry on.
Absolutely.
And obviously it did, which was great to see.
Yeah.
But over the last week or so, made Hull FC. They've cleaned house. They've, I guess, mutually parted ways with Tony Smith. We've seen Nu Brown and Tex Hoy leave the club. It's a bit of a bid to salvage their season, you could say.
Yes, and I wasn't surprised at those departures. Tony Smith first, obviously. Tony's was very keen to say that he was in a rebuilding phase with Hull FC, and that would have been fine if Tony had been in his first season at Hull FC, but he was in his second season, so the rebuilding phase should have been, resetting the culture. That's what should have happened last year, and this year they should have recruited the right players to actually have in place what Tony wanted, and for one reason or another, their recruitment doesn't seem to have been great. And then, of course, they've been dogged by a lot of injuries, particularly to Jake Truman, who's the crucial guy, who's out of action. And they've had a very bad disciplinary record this year. Lots of red and yellow cards. I think total of 10 or something like that. So it's not gone well, and inevitably, when things don't go well, the coach gets it in the neck, or gets marched out of the building, I suppose you might say. So, they'd lost 3 out of the last 4 games by conceding 50 or more points. So it was probably inevitable. Whether Tex Hoy and Nu Brown, Nu Brown, the club says that Nu Brown has gone home because his wife has already gone home because she's got an illness in the family. A parent, I think, is very unwell. So obviously, our sympathy goes to her and to their family. But Tex Hoy, people say that Tex Hoy hasn't performed. I thought when Hull played Lee, I thought he was the only player on the pitch for Hull who did play well, actually. So I was a bit surprised to see that rather damning indictment of Tex Hoy that came from the club. But, I've not seen every game of theirs, so, I'm quite prepared to concede that other people who have seen every game might, conceivably say that he's not been good enough. But and I noticed his father had a bit of a say, didn't he? His father's a very famous Australian surfer, isn't he? Matt Hoy, a guy called Matt Hoy. And I think he voiced a bit of criticism of Hull FC as well online somewhere. So obviously they've now got 2 free quota spots that they can recruit into if they want to do that, which I'm sure they probably will want to.
Yeah, I feel a bit bad for Tex Hoy because, a player in his position, he needs, his forwards to lay the platform in the middle.
Absolutely, and they weren't doing.
That's right. And when you're getting run off the park every single week, you don't have any opportunity to attack, and you're defending the whole game. How is he going to stand out in a side
He was
like
just
that?
exposed, wasn't he, by the lack of... certainly by the lack of defensive metal up front. I mean, Hull's problem is a defence. The defence looks shambolic, and and I'm afraid, as I say, if the defence looks shambolic, the coach gets it in the neck, and that's what's happened there.
And obviously we had Gary Schofield on a few weeks ago. He was quite critical of the playing group.
Scathing, I would say.
Yeah. He was saying that this isn't Tony Smith's fault. This is the playing group not buying into the club. The
trouble is you don't know whose fault it is really, because we're not part of the inner circle at Hull. All we can do is make judgments on what we see on the field, and clearly the players haven't been doing it. I actually thought in the last game, Hull looked a lot better carrying the ball, but they looked hopeless defensively, didn't they? Right from the start of the game, and you just can't carry on. That was against Huddersfield. You just can't carry on like that, and there's only so much disillusion the fans can take as well. And you've got to be aware that if you keep playing that badly, your fans are going to react. Some of them by staying away, no doubt. So, but interestingly, they've now appointed Richie Myler, the ex-Leeds player who's been playing at York this year, as their new Director of Rugby. Now, that's if Warrington's appointment of Sam Burgess was a surprise, then Hull's appointment of Richie Myler as Director of Rugby is probably an even bigger surprise, because he's going to go straight from being a player to having a highly responsible position. Adam Pearson's made it clear that he will be the chief instigator of the search for a new coach. And he will take charge of recruitment, and he'll take charge of the academy squad and so on, bringing players through into the first team from the lower grades at the club. And I really hope for the club that Richie does a fabulous job there. And I mean, I think Richie, I've spoken to Richie a few times and in the past, and he always strikes me as a very intelligent young guy who thinks a lot about the game and knows a lot about it, and is a bit of a rugby league nerd, really, in a way. And hopefully that means he's going to do a great job for them.
He'll also be in charge of working their salary cap out, won't he?
I imagine so. And interestingly, Adam Pearson was interviewed on Radio Humberside on Friday night. And, that was a coup. Well done, Radio Humberside, for getting him to come onto their sports programme. And he gave quite a long, wide-ranging interview. And we've actually taken quite a bit of what he said and adapted it into news stories in this week's League Express. But, he made it clear. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, Sky Sports estimated that Hull were spending something like 1.8 million, I think it was, under the terms of the salary cap, but Adam made it actually clear that they're spending the maximum under the salary cap, 2.35 million, I think it is. But they've not got any marquee players. Every club can have 3 marquee players, and he more or less made it clear that they don't have any, and which has been a deliberate policy there, which doesn't mean to say that they won't have in future. But whatever they've done, it's just not worked well, has it? And but they've got some really promising players coming through. We spoke last week, I think, about young Jack Charles, didn't we, who looks a really promising halfback for Hull FC. But Adam made it clear on Friday night that they're looking to recruit a halfback from somewhere to replace New Brown. They got New Brown as a hooker, but wanted him to play at halfback, and that's probably not worked as well as they would have liked. So the question is, who are they going to recruit as a new halfback at this stage in the season?
Drinkwater?
Well, I was going to say that. He's not getting in. He's not getting in at Warrington at the moment, is he? No. But he is an accomplished halfback. He knows what he's doing. He's got a really good kicking game. He looks as though he might be an obvious contender if Hull are going to go out into the Super League market and recruit somebody who would fit the bill and play alongside Jake Truman when Jake returns. I think he would be a quota player, though, wouldn't he? So that would probably take one quota spot. But, I can't think of an obvious better solution at the moment. But what's so ironic about Hull, Jake, is that they've let players go. I mean, it was funny for me to see, you talk about halfbacks. Last year they were bringing Ben McNamara through, but they let him go to Lee. And a week or two ago, Lee came to Hull and put 50 points on them, and Ben McNamara played a starring role. I mean, they let players go who they shouldn't let go. You could put together a team of ex-Hull players in Super League at the moment that would beat the current Hull team. Start with Jake Connor, at full-back. Then on the wings, you've got Adam Swift. You could even have Tom Briscoe, who left Hull many years ago, but who's at Lee, and you could go through the positions. You've got Mark Sneed at Salford. He was a Hull player, won the Lansdowne Trophy twice in 16 and 17. Mark Sneed playing alongside Ben McNamara, that would be very interesting, wouldn't it, if they were both still there? And then you've got forwards, they let Chris Satai go to Catalans this year. They've let the wrong players go, unfortunately. Yeah. And maybe Richie Myler can put that right.
Yeah, definitely. And it's almost like they're the West Tigers of the Super League. You look at all the former West Tigers players that are playing in the NRL with.
Well, Jez Litton's another one playing at Hull KR. They let him go. And he's obviously a very good player for Hull KR. And Dean Hadley, he's at Hull KR as well. You could go through every position, I think, and pick players who they've let go who would do a good job if they were still there.
And they've also appointed Simon Griggs as the interim head coach.
Yes.
And he was an assistant already.
He was the ex-Halifax coach. And, well, good luck to Simon. I hope it goes well for him. And he might be a contender for the top job, and great if he is, and a great guy, Simon. Obviously, he's inherited a difficult situation, but it will be the test of his mettle to see how he handles it, I think.
Now, a lot of fans, I've been reading a lot of comments. There's a lot of talk about it being the fifth coach in just over 4 years with Hull FC, I believe. Now, a lot of people are pointing the finger at Adam Pearson. Do you think he's on the hot seat at the moment? Could we see... Well,
you're always on the hot... As the owner of a club that's not doing well, you're always under pressure. Of course he's under pressure. I mean, the other thing that he talked about a lot on Friday was their search for new investment at Hull, and it does look as though there is potentially new investment on the horizon. And I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. Whether Adam will surrender some of his equity in the club to actually bring a new investor on board, that's obviously up to him. And you would imagine he would have to do that if he's going to attract significant, large amounts of money into the club. But I hope he does, because it's a big club, is Hull, and we want it to be a big club. We want Hull to be, in the market for silverware. I mean, it was great when they won the Challenge Cup 2 years in a row, and we all thought then that we were going to be in for a period of real Hull success, but it's not turned out that way, and it's particularly galling for them when they see Hull KR, doing well. There's that great rivalry in Hull between the two clubs, and Hull need to get back to being a team to be feared by everyone.
Well, it's certainly alarming or sad when you see Robins fans giving sympathy to FC fans. I've seen a few comments saying I feel bad for the black and whites.
There's nothing worse than sympathy, is there? You sort of feel like they probably feel like punching their Hull KR taunters, I suppose. Yeah. But it's I think a lot of that sympathy will be quite fake sympathy, to be honest.
No doubt. Now, in other news, with New Brown moving back to Australia, he's I think it's been announced today or just overnight that he's signed a deal with St George Illawarra Dragons. So,
is he right? Okay.
Yes. So I think he played under Flanagan at the Sharks, or was in their system at the Sharks. So that connection's already been established.
Well, Flanagan's doing a damn good job at the Dragons, actually, so far this year. I mean, it's a bit early to call it and to say they're going to be a top 8 side, but they beat West Tigers at the weekend in front of a full house at Campbelltown, and I've always had a high regard for Shane Flanagan as a coach, and he's showing again. I mean, he's sorting out some of the problems there. It's just a bit unfortunate that they can't keep their top guy, isn't it? The guy who just seems to be scoring tries for fun, young Lomax, Zach Lomax. I mean, he's a real great player, and the weird thing is that Flanagan shifted him to the wing, which has turned out to be a masterstroke, but Lomax doesn't accept it. Lomax is playing brilliantly in that position, but doesn't want to play there. It's a real conundrum, really. But obviously they've now allowed him to negotiate elsewhere. Now, has he signed a Parramatta deal yet for next year? I'm not sure.
Nothing official.
Not sure it's been announced yet. I mean, there's still a bit of way to go there before that's finalised. But the Dragons are doing really pretty well, and I mean they're still only 13th, but I mean it's a very tight competition in the NRL this year, and that's the great thing about that competition. It is such a tight competition, and it's just great to watch, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not in any NRL tipping competitions this year because I just thought it's going to be too hard.
Yeah, well,
and
you're a coward. You're a coward.
Pretty much. I can't deal with the embarrassment.
No.
But yeah, you're exactly right about Lomax. And when that move was made, you and I had a bit of a discussion about it on the podcast, and we sort of argued that his path to becoming a representative player, the odds are much greater at him representing New South Wales or Australia on the wing versus in the centres. Thought so. Yeah. Because you have fullbacks around the competition that tend to take up those centre spots, like Tom Trbojevic and Latrell Mitchell, because Tedesco's obviously the Australian fullback. So Lomax is one of those players. He came through with so much potential. He represented Australia in, I think it was 4 or 5 different sports. He was just a freak athlete coming through, much like Kalen Ponga was, but he just hasn't quite lived up to that potential, and maybe now on the wing we're starting to recognise that potential.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, I think he's a great player. I mean, whether he's lived up to his potential or not, I think he's certainly living up to a significant proportion of it, really, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really rate him very highly, and I'd love to see him in Super League at some time.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't suppose that will ever happen, though.
Yeah, we'll see. Now, in other news, there's been a little bit of controversy around a tackle that was committed in the Wigan Cass game. Sylvester Namo is in danger of a lengthy stint following that hit on
I think
Willie
he's in
Isa.
front. I think he's in front of the tribunal tonight, isn't he?
Yeah. It was a grade F charge, and if guilty, he could face 6 weeks on the sideline. Now, if anyone's seen the replay, basically there was 2 defenders wrestling up high, and Namo's come in from the side, I believe, made contact around the hip area with his shoulder, which caused an injury to Isa's lower leg.
I've not seen footage of that yet, but it sounds very serious.
Yeah, so I have seen the footage, and I'm going to say this. I feel very sorry for Isa, but if he hadn't have got injured, I believe that the ref would have just played on. There wasn't, he hit around the hip area, which is happens hundreds of times at every single match.
Yeah.
So I think they do have grounds to fight this, and hopefully.
Well, we'll see. Yeah.
I mean, it is disappointing to see Willie.
Best wishes to Willie Isa for a recovery from that injury. He's going to presumably be out for a while, and I hate seeing players injured, particularly carried off. And apparently, he was carried off, and oxygen was applied to him. So he's obviously quite seriously injured, and there was a significant delay in the game for him to be taken from the field. But a good luck to him and to everybody who's around him for a recovery as quick as possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll see if we can find the footage and put that in the YouTube episode too for those that are watching. Now we'll move on to some other news. So over the weekend, some good news here. Tara Jones became the first female referee to referee a professional game in the Northern Hemisphere.
She did.
She had the
She's an amazing
match.
woman, isn't she, Tara? She became last year the first woman to score a try in a Challenge Cup final at Wembley.
Yeah, wow.
When St Helens won the cup, but she combines playing with refereeing, which is amazing. Really, it would be a bit like finding that George Williams is also refereeing in League One. The women's game, it could be. That would be a bit of a surprise. But no, great to see Tara. She obviously has a career as a referee mapped out when her playing career ends, but she's only 28 actually, so she's still young enough to play for several years yet. And she'll be playing, no doubt, this weekend because the Women's Super League competition begins this weekend. So, that's going to be quite interesting, isn't it? And, we keep seeing these sort of milestones being reached, don't we, with women in rugby league? And it's wonderful to see. Of course, there the plenty of women now. Well, not plenty, but a significant number of women refereeing in the NRL.
Mm.
We've got and oddly enough, Casey Badger was criticised quite strongly by Des Hasler at the weekend, wasn't he? Mm. If you after that game between Canberra and the Gold Coast on Sunday.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Was it Casey or was it Belinda Sharp?
I think it was Casey Badger who was doing that game.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure which.
Two female referees.
They both referee at first grade level, and do a very good job as far as I'm concerned. But but there were some great games in the NRL at the weekend, weren't there? Close games. One game ended in a draw, and even after Golden Point time, that was the New Zealand Warriors versus Manly game, and in Canberra, the Gold Coast Titans, who I really have a soft spot for, they just lost in the last minute of Golden Point time, and ironically, it was Jamal Fogarty who landed the field goal, and Jamal Fogarty was, I thought, a great player for the Gold Coast, and they let him go in 2022. Why they did that, I've no idea, because I thought he was their best player at the time.
Well, from memory,
but it goes back to the point I was making about Hull. You let good players go, and they come back to bite you, unfortunately.
No, yeah, definitely. And I think from memory, they let go of Fogarty to bring through Toby Sexton at the time, who's now playing for the Bulldogs.
Absolutely, yes.
So that's backfired for the Titans. And Fogarty, I would argue, is the better player of the two.
So would I,
continuing to prove that. But just one before we go to the NRL news, Hull KR, they've signed a partnership agreement with the PNG Vipers, which will see two of the Vipers juniors come over and join the Hull KR Academy, I believe.
Yes.
Which is great news for Papua New Guinea Rugby League, and it's a real talent pool there that probably needs to be explored.
Oh, well, I mean, what a great innovation from Hull KR, and they've had links with Papua New Guinea for quite a long time through Stanley Jean, or Jenny as it's normally pronounced these days, and it's great to see that link being strengthened, and they will bring two players over. And the great thing is, if they're playing their academy side, then those players will be regarded as federation-trained players, so they won't be regarded as overseas-trained players, for the sort of purposes of the salary cap and the overseas quota and so on. So it's a pretty smart move by Hull KR, and I would imagine that the quality of player they'll be able to get from PNG will be very high, and they'll be able to mould them into players who will suit the Hull KR style of play. The only potential drawback for that is that winter time in England, which is pre-season time, is pretty cold for PNG players, so that they'll have to sort of settle in and keep them warm. Because certainly in my experience, it's a terrible shock for people from PNG. It's such a warm country. Yeah. To come over here in winter and when it's freezing or near freezing, and can be quite dispiriting. But I'm fairly sure that Hull KR will have that under control.
Oh, definitely. And pack your thermals, boys. You're going to need them.
Yeah.
But yeah, really looking forward to see who they bring over, and then watching them develop over the coming years.
It's going to be great, isn't it?
Which will be fantastic to see. So we will move on to some of our NRL news now. It's official. Joey Manu will join a Japanese rugby club, the Toyota Verblitz, I believe that's how you say it. He's going to depart at the end of 2024, and it comes after he's just had a magnificent performance playing at fullback for the Roosters. He ran for 347 metres, and 136 of those were post-contact metres. So a big loss for the NRL and the Sydney Roosters, obviously. But
yes, I mean, he's said that he wants ultimately to play for the All Blacks at Rugby Union, which is disappointing in a way, because obviously he is a great player, and we'd like to keep him in the game. I'm sure the Roosters would do, but having said that, it will relieve them of some salary cap pressure, no doubt. He's signed a 2-year deal to go to Japan. And, a lot of people are saying that he's going to be another Sonny Bill Williams and go all the way to the All Blacks. But it just shows the draw that international rugby union still has, and that's something that our sport needs to come to terms with and develop our own international program that can stand comparison with rugby unions, because otherwise we'll continue to lose players like this. Of course, the Roosters are losing Joseph Suali'i at the end of the season, although he's staying in Australia with the Waratahs, as I understand it. But, we don't want to be losing too many players, do we?
No. And it makes you wonder, he's still young enough to the point where he could go play a World Cup and then potentially come back to the Roosters.
Could do, but it's funny. What I find is very often that players who go to rugby union and then come back to league are never quite the players that they were before they left. There are exceptions, and some people may say Roger Tuivasa-Sheck is one of those, having come back to the New Zealand Warriors this year, but very often that's not the case. And I do think if you spend a couple of years or even longer in rugby union and then try and come back, your edge has been blunted, unfortunately.
And it's hopefully we do see him back in the game, but you just touched on the international game and how if we can build that up, that will attract hopefully
we need to do
the best rugby players to come over as well. But I will say, if it wasn't for the Warriors' success last season and how well they played, we might not have seen Tuivasa-Sheck decide to come back. I think that was a big draw for him.
That's right. And the interesting thing is about the Warriors, the New Zealand Warriors are more popular in New Zealand than the New Zealand Kiwis, the international side. When the Kiwis played a game in Hamilton last year, they only drew about half a stadium full of fans. If the Warriors had played there, they'd have sold out. And that's the problem, isn't it? It's not a bad thing that the Warriors are so popular in New Zealand, but they urgently need to make the New Zealand side as popular as the Warriors, if not more so.
And I guess the rise of Tonga and Samoa is also having an impact on fans of the Kiwis.
Absolutely,
yeah. Fingers crossed, and hopefully the Kiwis can build off the back of that success the Warriors
Indeed.
have seen. Now, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but no news yet on the possible departure of Jason Demetrio. Now, there's been a new appointment, though. David Furness coming back to be an assistant,
yes,
which implies that JD will retain his job.
Well, apparently, when Sam Burgess left midway through last year, Jason then made his own appointments of people to take over from him, and the club were a bit dubious about allowing him to do that, but they let him go ahead. But now it seems that they want to sort of bring somebody in who can help him in a serious way, and they obviously think David Furner can do. David had a very short spell a few years ago as the coach of Leeds Rhinos over here. And I met him a few times, and he was a great guy, I thought. But, for some reason it didn't work out for him at the Rhinos. And he may be one of those guys who's better as an assistant coach than as a head coach. Who knows? But obviously he's going to have a role there now. But they need to start winning soon, don't they? Because they are currently at the bottom of the table, even below Gold Coast Titans, although Gold Coast's only points have come from a bye. You get 2 points for a bye in Australia. So, Gold Coast are off the bottom, but South Sydney urgently need to... and South Sydney get the bye this weekend, so they will have 4 points at this time next week. So that's interesting. But they've got to start, getting some wins together. And what I was surprised by was that Dimitri dropped Damien Cook at the weekend. And Damien Cook has always been the top tackler for South Sydney, and as a player I rate highly, and I was surprised to see him being dropped. I don't know why Jason decided to drop him, but my goodness, that was a big move. And obviously, a lot of people said, well, South Sydney played a lot better against Cronulla than they'd done in previous games, but they still lost 34-22. So, you play better, but you still lose. Well, that's not really, it's good to play better, but you need to play better and win, don't you?
And hopefully a weekend off, they can, reset and come back and hopefully put the start of the season behind them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm interested to see what happens there, because there was a lot of talk around Mal Meninga potentially coming in and taking over as an interim coach.
Yeah, I think he would have. I mean, that could still happen potentially, couldn't it? If Souths lose their next game badly, for example, you never know. But coming in halfway through a season as an interim coach, I'm not sure that would be Mal's favoured option. Really, I mean, he is the Australian coach, isn't he? And I don't think he'd want to potentially mar his reputation by taking on a club that's in trouble and maybe not being able to get them out of trouble.
I believe he did say on SCN radio that the interim role would interest him, but a long-term role wouldn't, because of his commitments to his broadcasting with Fox League and obviously his Australian head coaching role there as well. So interesting to hear those comments from him on the matter. But yeah, we'll see how the Bunnies respond after a weekend off. Before we get into this weekend's matchups, Martyn, is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we preview?
No, I think we've covered a lot of things fairly in depth there, haven't we? So, if we've missed something out, we apologise, but I can't think there's too many other things that we want to talk about.
Well, leading up to the podcast, I think it was last week, when all the Hull FC news was dropping, I thought,
absolutely,
here's all the content for next week's episode to talk about.
Indeed.
So, didn't have to look too hard.
No.
But yeah, we'll take a look at this weekend's matchups to get you quick picks, Martyn. The first matchup, we got Leeds taking on Huddersfield.
I think that's a really interesting game, isn't it? And both sides need to... but both sides need a win. Huddersfield have just crept into the top 6. Leeds are in 8th place at the moment, but both are on 8 points from 7 games. Huddersfield have just got a better points difference. So it's a really crucial game for both sides, and in terms of current form, you've got to say that Huddersfield must be the favourites, haven't you, really? And, I think they probably are, and they've often done quite well against Leeds. But I think it'll be a really tight game. I mean, these games are always very close between these two sides, and I think I'd tip Huddersfield to win, but by no more than 6.
Yeah, no, it's set to be a close one.
Yeah.
Then we have St Helens taking on Hull FC.
Do you think I'd be a lunatic if I said Hull were going to win this game? Because I think I probably would be, wouldn't I? No, I think obviously you've got to say St Helens are going to bounce back from that Warrington defeat, and Hull are going to take the brunt of it. I'd say Saints will probably win by about 30 points.
And they'll be motivated to have a big win after last weekend's performance.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Well, I mean, Saints are in 5th place in the table, again, with a worse points difference than the 3 sides above them, who are all on 10 points. But, they've now only got the Super League title to play for. So I think they'll be really focused on doing well for the rest of the season now.
Yep. And is it Wigan taking on Castle again?
Gosh, well, I mean, Wigan won by 54 points away from home in the Cup. Yeah. It's difficult to see anything other than a similar margin at the DW Stadium. I hope it's not. I mean, I hope Castleford can put up a better performance, obviously, but you just can't see them, getting near Wigan, can you, I'm afraid?
Do you think Matty Pete might look at resting 1 or 2 players?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure he's the sort of guy who does rest players, but he has done occasionally. He does give opportunities to players. Sometimes, they've got this young kid, Jack Farimond, who, they played him at London Broncos earlier this year when I suppose they thought the result was pretty safe, and it clearly was. So we might see him again, potentially. Obviously, with Willie Ice's absence, we're going to see more of Junior and Semba, who I think is a potentially great player. Very young kid at the moment, still a teenager, I think. But his size and power and, ability are tremendous. So, that's not going to be much of a consolation for Castleford, is it, if he starts the game?
No.
There's only one result there, I'm afraid.
Yeah, tremendous potential. We can't wait to see him unleashed.
No.
Then the next matchup, we have London taking on Salford.
Well, Salford had a disappointing result last time out, didn't they, against Castleford? But I can't see them slipping up at London. I mean, London will probably benefit from having a week off last weekend. Because in the last game they were really down to their last 17 players, and hopefully some of those will come back again this week, and we'll see them with a stronger side against Salford. But I can't see them winning. I think Salford winning probably by about 16 points.
Moving on to Warrington taking on Lee.
I think that's a really good game. I mean, if Lee were at full strength, I think this would be a really tight game. Sadly, though, they're not at full strength. And although we talked earlier about Tom Amone being back and what a terrific, amount of forward power he brings to Lee, I just don't think they'll be strong enough. I mean, it's funny, Lee have had a really tough fixture list so far, haven't they? They seem to play at all the top sides, and all the top sides when they're coming into form as well. So, they've not played London, they've not played Hull, they've not played Castleford yet, which sort of means that the league table is a bit sort of skewed, and not in their favour, really. But I can't quite see them winning at Warrington. I think Warrington will win by about 12.
Yeah. We have Catalans taking on Hull KR.
Well, that's a really good game, isn't it? And fortunately, that will be on TV at the weekend. Catalans are going to have to rebound from that Challenge Cup disappointment, and I think they probably will. But I'm not confident that they'll beat Hull KR, but I think they might just win by about 4 points.
Yeah, well, it's set to be a big weekend of rugby, that's for sure. But we'll quickly touch on the English players down the NRL are playing really well at the moment. Kai Pearce-Paul
had a great game for Newcastle, didn't he?
Morgan Smithy's still topping tackling counts.
Playing well for Canberra, yes. I mean, Newcastle lost narrowly to the Sydney Roosters, didn't they, at the weekend? Yep. But Kai Pearce-Paul had a great game by all accounts. And no, it's great to see English players doing well, although young Will Price, I think, still hasn't had a run yet for Newcastle. I hope that he'll force his way into the side before too long. It would be very good to see that happening. But
apparently he's been killing it in the New South Wales Cup. I think in his debut match he scored 2 tries and had a handful of try assists. So
he's a very talented player, and I think he'll benefit a lot from being there when as the season goes on.
And it's a long season, and I'm sure injuries will occur at some point, so I'm sure he'll get his chance.
Absolutely.
And we can't wait to see that. But yeah, mate, well, if you're happy to
just one final comment to make. Now, I think while I think of it, in the Championship, it was great to see Lachlan Walmsley scoring 4 tries for Wakefield Trinity. Now he's a winger, an Australian winger actually, who's come over here, was playing for Halifax last year, and has moved to Wakefield. And I think he's got Super League potential. He's way out on top of the Championship try scoring chart already. If I can just open this page, I just want to check something here because in milestones this week, he needed 4 tries for the 100th try of his career, and he got them. He was on 96 before the weekend, and his 4 tries put him up to 100.
Wow.
So that was a really great win for Wakefield at York, and a great personal triumph for Lachlan Walmsley. And I also I think we ought to just make one comment about the tragic event that occurred in Sydney at the weekend with that dreadful series of murders at the Westfield Shopping Centre in Bondi. Our sympathies go out to everybody, I think, in Australia, obviously your country, who lost loved ones in that terrible situation. Particularly, one guy who I do know vaguely is the great John Singleton, the millionaire businessman who's a real rugby league fanatic, and he tragically lost his 25-year-old daughter in that attack. So that was awful, as it was for all the people who lost members of their families in that absolutely senseless attack. So our condolences go to everybody who was affected, and I'm sure you'd echo that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was heartbreaking, and you see news headlines like that pop up on your phone, and you just can't believe something like that can happen.
No. I mean, I do know that part of Sydney, and the thought that you could be out shopping on a Saturday afternoon, I think it was, and something like that happen is just unbelievable, isn't it, really?
That's it. And I listen to a lot of NRL podcasts and former players that live in that area and say, they attend that shopping centre 3 or 4 times a week, and just to think that it could have been them or their family.
It could.
Really hits home, but yeah, devastating news, and our thoughts and condolences go out to all of their families. And
absolutely.
Hopefully they can get through this tough time. But before we wrap up, though, just a reminder to our viewers and listeners, if you do want to grab yourself a subscription to League Express, head along to www.totalrl.com/shop.
And I'll just say on that subject that I wrote an article in League Express this week about where has the Challenge Cup magic gone, what's happened to the Challenge Cup to make it lose such a lot of status. And in next Monday's paper, I'll be writing about how to restore the magic of the Challenge Cup. And I'm fairly confident I know how it could be done. So if you want to read an article on that topic, maybe agree or disagree with me, whatever you think, then make sure you get a copy of League Express next week, because I'll be setting out what I think can be done to really make the Challenge Cup great again.
Why don't we put out the question to the viewers and listeners? If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment under the video what you think needs to be done to restore the greatness of the Challenge Cup.
Yeah.
And we can compare notes next episode, perhaps.
I'm sure we will, and thanks for watching to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great to see you again, Jake.
Yeah, and don't forget to hit subscribe as well, guys. But we'll do it all again next week, Martyn.
Thanks, Jake. It's a pleasure.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, mate. Bye.